I'll start with Mr. Mahat, who without leave proceeded to convert this courtroom into a classroom. Mr. Mahat, there was an allegation that 33,000 vote differential were noted between the votes cast for the president and those for governor, senator, women rep. You tried this morning to explain that some of those instances arose from stray ballots. Would you tell us how many constitute stray ballots? And can you also share with us how those stray ballots are distributed in terms of counties? Related to that, did you have, in your analysis, did you have any instances where voters walked into the polling station, voted for the president, and no other candidate or no other category of candidates, what in this court we call the Mwilu question, in reference to my lady, the vice president, I think arising from the 2017 question that I think my lady and my lord, Mr. Justice Smokin Wanjala posed. Did you have any of those where you are issued with 5, 6 ballot papers, but you don't utilize all of them? Senior Counsel Kamau Karori, the appointment of the chairperson of the IBC was gazetted by the chairman himself. I would like to know whether he was gazetted as an agent of the commission or he was gazetted as national returning officer in his capacity as the chairman of the commission, and whether, if it was as an agent of the commission, whether there were any resolutions preceding this appointment. I'm back to Mr. Mahat with the question of voter turnout. According to your presentation on PowerPoint this afternoon, you said there were 45,994 voters were identified through Kim's kit, and this is out of 46,229. That Kim's kit were used in 45,994 polling stations out of 46,229. That gives us 235 polling stations, which I assume I did not use Kim's kit. Therefore, assuming that the manual system was employed to identify them, are you able to say the numbers from these 235 polling stations? I saw some figures like 860 or 86,000, 114,000. So if you can just clarify that for us. And again to Mr. Mahat, because he dealt with figures. Mr. Umtata yesterday presented also a PowerPoint to demonstrate that 1.6 million votes were cast or were streaming in many hours after the closure of voting. If you can also respond to that question. Mr. Gumbo, both Mr. Issa and Mr. George Raro, Senior Counsel, in their submissions, talked about how Kenyans were following the streaming of results live. And then something happened and that stopped. Can you explain to us what may have happened for this to have stopped? My lady, those are all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Council. Again, your submissions were most helpful. We thank you. Professor Maiga, you said that the whole dispute revolves around numbers. And you were before us in 2017, and the question of Section 83 of the Elections Act was prominent at the time. Morgan versus Simpson was prominent. You were Attorney General at the time. A number of things happened around Section 83 post our judgment. My question is, looking at the qualitative, the quantitative test, and Professor Kindiki raised the question too around Section 83. I had it before he raised it. Could you speak to it, and what is the approach you should take in this case regarding the test to apply? Number two, again to your team, and any of you could answer it. It's not a flippant question. I'm raising it deliberately because I have reason to. I know that the events of 15th August are in our minds, but remember that there was an extra day by which Mr. Chebukati could have declared the result. Why did he not wait until that day? Violence or no violence? Perhaps you have another reason. Reach out to the commissioners, the four that are now named the four. Try and reach a consensus. Address the question of the 27 constituencies so that these suspicions that have now cropped up would not have been an issue. Is there any other reason why he did not take advantage of the extra day to do what he had to do? Mr. Raro, I understand where you're coming from. I understand where your clients are coming from. I understand where Mr. Kenyo and Mr. Kihara and the rest are coming from. We are now in a sport where public office is becoming exceedingly dangerous. Falsehoods are being peddled, not just to those on this side, but more even on this side and those outside. So I understand the need for you to say, my clients would like to clear their names because they've been mentioned in these proceedings. But let us come back to the proceedings, the pain of social media, the pain of affidavits aside. What do you want this court to do with the information you've given us? So we have had your side of the story. We've had Mr. Chebukati's side. We've had Cherera's side and our colleagues. What do you tell the court to do in the context of this judgment, in the context of the issues for determination? What do we do with the matters you placed before us? And while you're at it, you also mentioned Section 83. Perhaps you could also say something about Regulation 87.3. Perhaps since you appear for the Attorney General, and for the first time you're not appearing as amicus but as a respondent, could you say something about Regulation 87.3 and the question I posed to Mr. Noroji? It would be helpful for us if we could hear you on that question. I believe those are my... Mr. Mahat, I may have missed this, but I still want to clear my... This is a question I posed to Mr. Murgora as well. So the format initially is JPEG. At what point exactly does it convert to PDF? Forget the CSV story. I guess Mr. Murgora dropped that. But I just want to understand for myself. At what point you've taken the image, you've asked all the questions, very good questions you've asked, the system has asked you the question. At what point does it convert to PDF? I thank you all very much. Thank you, Judge President.
Thank you, Judge President. My questions will go to Professor Maiga. As we've been asked by a number of parties that they've asked us to settle the law around Article 138.3 2010. In your submissions, you suggested that the term commission can be used in multiple senses. How do we know which sense will be applied when? As a former Attorney General, perhaps you can point out to us whether it is in regulations, it is in the law, but how do we know which sense is applied when? My second question goes to the history of independent commissions, and Professor Maiga, you sat on the CKRC together with my colleague, Justice Lenaula, and you do know that the drafters of the Constitution introduced independent commissions and independent offices to deal with issues of authoritarianism, accountability, transparency, and to do away with the issue of one person having power. But from the narrative that we're hearing here in the court, there appears to be an all-powerful chair who, so what is the check for this all-powerful chair if the commissioners have nothing to do with his role? What would happen if the chair was to announce the wrong results completely? Or if he was mentally incapacitated or sick, or worst case scenario, dead? Who then would announce the results? What is the role of the other commissioners? I think this is bothering me, especially because it seems to me that your client and the IEBC suggest that the chairperson works with the CEO, and I feel a bit concerned. The CEO is not vetted by Parliament. He's appointed, but he seems to wield immense powers over and above the other commissioners. I cannot imagine that that could have been the intention of the drafters of the Constitution. So what role do these commissioners actually do? Because it hasn't come clearly. Or, for example, if one commissioner says he's in charge of ICT, what does that mean? Does it mean he's in charge of ICT until the presidential election, then he's not? What does it mean? What is the role of these commissioners? And I'm asking this question more towards trying to understand the leadership and the management in the commission as opposed to the management of the presidential election. Because I think they're two separate issues, and I'm trying to figure out whether this is a Chebukati problem. Is it a leadership problem? Is it a commissioner's problem? What's this problem we're seeing? I'm trying to understand that, and I'd like to hear that from you. Thank you. One more question, sorry. When the results come for other elections, so you have returning officers for senator, for governor, for MCA, and they're all announced or declared locally at the polling station, constituency, county. How is that information transmitted to the public? And when that information is transmitted to the public through a gazette notice, are the commissioners involved? Or is it the CEO only? Or is it the chairperson only? Who is involved in the declaration or the transmission of declaration publicly of those results? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice.